Awesome. Well, if you guys have your Reconcile apps, or if you have your Bibles, Genesis 29 is where we are. Genesis 29 is where we're going to be today. You guys remember where we left off pre-Holy Week. We were in Genesis 29, and we talked about how the book of Hosea warns us that those who sow the wind reap the whirlwind. And we experienced last time that Jacob and his mother Rebekah had sown the wind through their deception, through their trickery, through their treachery, through their deceit, through their manipulation. They had sown the wind, and Jacob had to reap the whirlwind and the storm, the tornado. Jacob has now got to reap that, and unfortunately, his mom, who helped lead him and guide him through this treachery, she's nowhere to be found. Jacob's on his own, and he has to suffer the consequences of his actions. And last time, Jacob, the deceiver, the manipulator, the trickster, was deceived and tricked and manipulated by his uncle Laban as he labored 7 years for Rachel. But he found out on his wedding night when he woke up the next morning that he had been duped by his father-in-law and had been given her sister Leah in this bait and switch tragedy that took place. And so Jacob agrees to work an additional 7 years for Rachel. And so Jacob is heartbroken that his uncle, his mother's brother, would take advantage of him the way he had, but Jacob had taken advantage of his brother on 2 occasions. And so Jacob is reaping what he has sown. And it's not over yet. As we move into the latter part of Genesis 29 and into Genesis 30, Jacob is still reaping the whirlwind that he has sown. But even in the midst of consequences for sin and for iniquity and for trespasses and for wickedness, God's blessing is still evident, because he has guaranteed that he would bless this family, and God's commitment to bless them is a unilateral commitment and covenant and agreement and contract to bless these people. And it's not contingent upon their obedience. It's not contingent upon whether they obey God or not. That comes later with Moses' covenant. But Abraham's covenant, or Abraham's covenant, is a unilateral covenant. Otherwise, God couldn't bless people this wicked, this dysfunctional. But because the covenant is unilateral, God works through their brokenness to bring about his plans and his purposes, though there are consequences for sin, and Jacob is going to experience that. But here's the blessing. The blessing is that God told Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. Not just the land, not just the blessings, but also many offspring and many nations. And so here God is fulfilling that promise to his grandson Yaakov, or Jacob in the text. And what we see is God giving Jacob 12 children in this text. And so let's walk through how God fulfills the promise that he made a couple hundred years or so to his grandfather, Abraham. The first movement in the text is that Jacob has 4 sons initially with the wife that he didn't ask for, didn't want, and didn't desire. Leah. And so how does this all come together? I want to remind you the last verse before we get into today's text in verse 31. Remember what verse 30 said that we looked at a few weeks ago prior to Holy Week. Verse 30, Genesis 29 says this, and you don't have this in your slides. It says that Jacob slept with Rachel also, And indeed, he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. So we talked about how Jacob comes from a family of favoritism, where Esau is the favorite son of Isaac, and Jacob is the favorite son of Rebekah. And here, unfortunately, he's got these two wives. He only wanted one wife, but he was tricked into marrying two wives, and they're sisters. And Jacob favors Rachel, and he disfavors Leah. So as he is the husband of two wives, one of them has his heart and has his attention and has his affection, and the other does not. And that favoritism that Jacob learned as a kid in his dysfunctional household, he brings that with him into his polygamous situation, and that creates chaos and confusion, dysfunction and malfunction in Jacob's family. Look at this as we continue on with the story now, beginning in verse 31 through 35, as Jacob has these 4 children with the wife that he does not care for. Watch this. It says in verse 31, and you guys have these slides in your Coram Deo so you can follow along with me. It says, verse 31 of Genesis 29, when Yahweh saw that Leah was neglected, your text may say, if you have a different version, that Leah was hated by Jacob. He opened her womb, but Rachel was unable to conceive. So we see in this text that God sees. The first thing we see, and we're going to see God seeing, and then Rachel seeing, and then Leah seeing. The transitions in this text are all around observation. So God is looking at Jacob's marriage to these two sisters, the older sister and the younger sister, and God sees that Leah is Cana, that she is hated, that she's despised, neglected, unloved by Jacob. And what does God do for the unloved wife, the one that is neglected? I think the text says in verse 30 that Jacob loved Rachel more than he loved Leah. So I don't think this word Cana in the Hebrew means that Jacob hated Leah. Now, he had no intentions of marrying Leah. He wanted her sister, but he was forced to marry her. And Genesis 30 says that he loved Rachel more. So I don't think Moses intends for us to take away from this that Jacob loves one wife and hates the other. He just loves one more than the other. And when you love something more than you love something else, you will give your time and affection and devotion and your heart to that thing more than the thing that you don't love as much. And so here is the family dynamics between the husband and these two wives. One is loved, and the other one is unloved, neglected, slighted, or even given the cold shoulder. And the reality is that Leah, I can just imagine how she feels. I mean, think about this. She didn't ask for this setup. This was all her father's doing. Can you imagine waiting your whole life, keeping yourself pure for the husband of your dreams? You finally, your dad arranges this marriage, sets you up with a husband, and then the husband you've been waiting for, that you've been dreaming about your whole life, you realize doesn't love you. I mean, unrequited love is one of the biggest and most sorrowful tragedies. All of us have loved somebody that didn't love us. I know I have, and it hurts bad when you've given your heart and soul to somebody who doesn't reciprocate your love and your affection. I mean, it's devastating, and I think we've all been there. And as my grandmother would say, if you haven't, keep living, because all of us experience that. And this is not Jacob's fault. This isn't Leah's fault. This is Laban's fault. And any dad who sets his daughters up for this kind of failure and this kind of disappointment and this kind of devastation, way to go, Dad. kind of dad does that? I see Derek's face. He's got a daughter. He's got a daughter, Jade, and he would never do this to his daughter. But Laban did this to his daughter. And so Laban has sown the wind through his treachery. And who's reaping the whirlwind? His daughter, through no fault of her own. And so this dynamics in this family is interesting. Pay attention to the last part of the verse, that God opens up Leah's womb. She's unloved, but God is blessing her, because she becomes fertile. But Rachel, the wife who's loved, the wife who has all of her husband's attention and affection, who has his heart and his devotion, she is unable to conceive. Infertility is a perpetual generational challenge in the patriarchal family, beginning with Sarah and her inability to conceive. Isaac's wife Rebekah was infertile as well. And now here, the wife that Jacob loves so much, she, like his mother and like his grandmother, is infertile as well. And so this is difficulty. How is God going to fulfill his destiny of increasing the descendants of the patriarch and making them more numerous than the dust of the earth, the sand of the seashore, and the stars in the sky? How is God going to do that with this difficulty of infertility that continues to dog this family? The same way God opened up Sarah's womb and Rebekah's womb, God is going to do that for Rachel. But just like her mother-in-law and her grandmother-in-law, she's going to have to wait and trust God. And so here God is responsible for opening and closing wombs and giving women the ability to conceive. And that is the privilege and the prerogative of Almighty God. And so Leah is fertile because of God's blessing. And so here Moses tells us a story of her giving birth to these first four sons. Watch this. Verse 32 says, Leah conceived and gave birth to a son, and she named him Reuben, for she said that the Lord Yahweh has seen my affliction, and surely my husband will love me now. And so Reuben in the Hebrew means see a son, behold, or look a son, because Ruah means to see and Ben means son. And so Reuben means to see or look or behold. Look at this, a son. And so that's what Reuben means. But look at what she says. She says that that Yahweh, the creator and sustainer of the universe, has seen my affliction because he saw that she was unloved. Now Yahweh sees that she's afflicted, and her affliction is the fact that she's married to a man who doesn't love her. And what is her hope? Her hope is that surely my husband will love me now. Folks, can I just point out that Leah's making the age-old mistake believing that having a child with someone will cause them to love you. It's a myth. It wasn't true for Leah, and it's rarely true ever since and in our day. And as I do premarital counseling with couples, especially if they're expecting, I remind them that having a child together if somebody doesn't love you, doesn't appreciate you, doesn't value you before the child, having a child doesn't guarantee that person is going to love you after the fact. We don't have kids in order to get someone's love and affection and attention. We get love and affection and attention first, and the kids flow out of that love. And so many couples and so many women, especially a woman who thinks that if I have his baby, he'll love me. That is the biggest myth. And here Leah is going to be devastated because she's hoping that, man, if Jacob and I are co-parenting and we're going to raise these kids together, then he has to love me. And she is going to be sadly mistaken because Jacob never truly loves Leah the way she wants to be loved. But they have this wonderful bouncing baby boy, Reuben, to begin with. And so verse 33 says, she conceived again and gave birth to a son and said that Yahweh has heard that I am neglected, that I am unloved, that I'm been given the cold shoulder by my husband, and he has given me this son also. And so she named him Shimeon, or in English, we say Simeon. Simeon comes from the Hebrew word Shema, when the Shema means in the Hebrew to hear or to listen. And so Shimeon is a derivative of the Hebrew word Shema. And so she believes that God has heard. Not only did he see that she was unloved, but God has also heard about it. And so she reminds herself that God has heard of her affliction, of her desperate plight. And so she names her son after what she believes God has done, and he's heard of her desperate situation. So behold a son, and here we have the one who hears, Reuben and Shimeon or Simeon. Then in verse 34, Leah conceives again, and she gave birth to a son and said, at last my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, she named the third son Levi, or we say Levi in our English. Levi is his name, and it comes from Leva in the Hebrew, and it simply means to be attached to be associated, to be connected to someone. And here Leah hopes that, man, it didn't work out when I had Reuben. My husband didn't love me, and I had Shimeon, and he's still not connected to me. But maybe with this third son, maybe the third time is a charm. We give birth to this son, Levi, and so I hope that my husband will be attached to me, that he will be connected to me in this way, because I need my husband to love me and to be connected. I mean, it's so important for wives and husbands to be connected together. And so it's interesting. One commentator says that Leah has not given up on Jacob. Jacob is giving his seed to Leah, but he's not giving his affection to her. I mean, how many times have you heard women just continue to have children with someone who doesn't love them, and they just keep having the babies in the hope that things will turn around? And Leah is in that same desperate situation, and it's just not working out. She longs for Jacob to be joined to her, to be attached, to be connected, and it's still not happening for her. She is devastated. But she doesn't stop there. She goes on in verse 35 to have baby number 4. She conceives again and gives birth to a son, and she says, this time I will praise Yahweh. Therefore, she named him Jehudah, or Judah. Then Leah stopped having children. It's interesting because Leah finally turns her affection from Jacob to Yahweh. And she's not worried about her husband at this point. Now she's focused on praising the Lord. And so Jehudah, we say in our English Judah, but it's Jehudah in the Hebrew text, means praise the Lord, or may the Lord be praised. It's so important that she names her 4th son, which shows her attitude is flipped from focusing on her husband to focusing on God. Here's something interesting. Let me give you a historical note. These last two sons are really important to the history of Israel. Levi and Judah are the future patriarchs to the priests. Levi, or the Levites, are the tribe from which the priests come. And Jehudah, or Judah, is the principal line through which the great kings of Israel, the ones that walk with God, they come from the tribe of Judah. Now, what's fascinating is that Leah is so morbid about how unloved and neglected and forgotten and kind of isolated from the relationship that Jacob has with her sister, and she has no idea she's given birth to two important sons through whom the future priests and kings will come from. See, folks, I think that sometimes our perspective is so narrow and we're so focused on gazing at our neighbors that we miss the reality that God is doing some stuff that if we just lifted up our eyes and asked God to help us see what's really going on, we would be able to see the forest for the trees. Leah doesn't see how great these two sons are that she's having. All she knows is how unloved she is. She has no idea what she's given birth to. We, on the other side, almost 4,000 years removed, we understand the historical impact. But I wish Leah had just prayed and said, Lord, help me see how important these children are. Help me to take my mind off of my difficulty, off of my affliction, off of my difficulty. Show me how important these children are going to be. I need to focus my attention on mothering them and preparing them to be the future change agents for your kingdom people, and not focus on my husband who actually prefers my sister more than he does me. Guys, if I could leave you with that, may we walk out of here with that, looking beyond our present circumstances and how unfortunate our situation is and the adversity that we experience and that we challenge, and help God show us, lift up our eyes and see things as He sees them. And I think it'll change our perspective and give us a little bit back, give us a little bit of our joy back. Leah misses that opportunity. May we learn from her mistake and not miss ours. Jacob has these 12 children in the text. 4 of them are with Leah. These 4 sons, Reuben, Shimeon, Levi, and Jehudah, or Judah. Now he's going to have 2 more children, but with Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, in the first 8 verses. Look at how this story unfolds, because here Rachel has had enough of her sister, who Jacob doesn't love, who has produced these 4 children, and she's still unable to conceive, and she's angry about it, and she goes straight to the patriarch and deals with her husband. Verse 1 though says, when Rachel saw, remember Yahweh saw that Leah was unloved. Now Rachel sees that she was not bearing any children to Jacob, and she envied her sister. And she says, give me sons or I will die, she said to Yaakov, or to Jacob. Rachel's envy for her sister's childbearing prowess leads her, due to intense desperation, to confront Jacob, who angrily responds. Again, she is jealous. This word in the Hebrew can connote jealousy on one hand or envy on the other, and the context usually helps us determine which nuance the author is intending, because we in English and in the Western culture, we use jealousy and envy interchangeably, but in the biblical world, they're very different ideas. Jealousy was actually a virtue in the ancient world. Jealousy is a strong desire for something that legitimately belongs to you, that is being used or enjoyed by someone else to whom it doesn't belong. Like you would be jealous if somebody drove off with your car. That car don't belong to you. Why are you taking off and driving off in my car? Right? Not their car, your car. That's jealousy in the ancient world. But envy was when you had that same strong desire for something or someone that did not belong to you, but you would move heaven and earth to enjoy that thing that doesn't belong to you. And you want it, you crave it, you lust for it, you got to have it. It's a strong desire. And here, I believe that Moses is the author of this text, and he's driving home the point that Rachel envies her sister's fertility because she's unable to give birth, and she confronts Jacob. and notice what she says to her husband. She says, "Give me sons, or I'm going to die." This is not an overreaction by Rachel. She's feeling peer pressure within her tribe to match her sister's reproductivity. And the reality is, one author says, throughout the Old Testament in most traditional societies, motherhood is perceived as the crowning joy of a woman's life. And here Rachel is got it good. She's got a husband who's crazy about her, but yet she is infertile. She has no children. And she blames Jacob for the fact that she has no children. And how does Jacob respond to his wife's admonition, her charge, her command to give me some children? You gave my sister 4, but you've given me no children. Jacob responds angrily in verse 2. He says to Rachel, he says, "Am I in the place of God? God is the one who has withheld offspring from you." In the text, Jacob says, the fruit of the womb, God has withheld that from you. Jacob is like, what are you blaming me for? You got to go deal with God. Obviously, I can have kids. I got 4 of them. You got a problem with God. And oftentimes, you guys, we've talked about this a lot with Sarah and with Rebecca. Oftentimes in antiquity, they believed that when a woman was infertile, that it was the gods who were punishing her for some sin or something. And so that was believed that you had to go engage in divination or some spiritual enterprise to get the gods to release the infertility. And so Jacob points Rachel to God to get an answer for what is blocking her ability to give birth. Now it's interesting because Rachel doesn't listen to Jacob. What does Jacob say? Jacob says, "Honey, why don't you go do what my mother did when she had a problem? My father prayed and God opened up her womb. My mother and my father sought God when they were having problems. Why don't you do what my mother did and you go see God and get an answer from the Almighty?" No, that's not what she does. She says, "No, I'm going to do what your grandmother did, and I'm going to take matters into my own hands." Whenever wives don't follow their husband's advice, especially in matters like this, as we've seen in Genesis, sometimes bad things happen. What does Rachel do? Look at what she does. She said, "Nah, I'm not going to do that. I know what to do. I'll fix this problem myself." Verse 3 says, "Then she said, 'Here's my slave, my maidservant Bilhah. Go and sleep with her, and she'll bear children for me, so that through her I can build a family.'" Now, you guys have been trekking with us through Genesis. This is deja vu all over again. We've seen this movie, and we know how it ends, and it doesn't end well. Sarah tried this with Hagar, and all hell broke loose in the family, remember? So here's the granddaughter doing the same thing the grandmother did, and how did that work out for them? Not so well. And why doesn't Jacob push back and say, no, honey, my grandparents did that. And you remember the story. You remember all the chaos and dysfunction and discord and family fighting and all the stuff. honey, why don't we do what I told you to do and let's seek God? There, Jacob doesn't push back. Just like his grandfather Abraham didn't push back, the grandson doesn't push back. And he goes on. He goes on with his wife's plan. And so look at this. So Rachel gave her slave to Bilhah to Yaakov as a wife, and Jacob slept with her. And so now Jacob has been forced into a second marriage that he didn't ask for, didn't want, and didn't desire. And so Jacob, the same way he didn't ask for Leah, but was forced to take her as a wife because of his uncle's treachery, now through his own wife, who he adores and he's crazy about, he's forced to take a third wife, a second marriage that he doesn't want, but a third wife, her slave, her handmaiden, just like Hagar was Sarah's slave and her handmaiden became Abraham's second-class wife. What do you guys do with this? This is Groundhog's Day all over again for us. This family perpetuates dysfunction generation after generation, and we keep scratching our heads saying, why do they keep this nonsense up? But the beauty is God works through it. Verses 5 and 6, Bilhah conceived and bore Yaakov a son, and Rachel said that Elohim, God has vindicated me. Yes, he has heard me and given me a son. So Rachel named this son born to Yaakov and Bilhah, she names him Dan. Dan means to vindicate or to judge. And so here she says that God has judged and defended her by giving her the son that she has longed for, even though it's through a surrogate and she's adopted this son as her own. She names him Dan. Well, Rachel, in verses 7 and 8, Rachel's slave Bilhah conceives again and bears Jacob a second son. And Rachel says, in my wrestlings with God, I have wrestled with my sister and I've won, I've triumphed. And she named this second son Naphtali. Naphtali is a word play on this word to wrestle, to struggle. It's the idea that she feels like she's had to contend with God, but ultimately her wrestling has been with her sister Leah and her reproductivity. And so in Rachel's mind, she's prevailed because now she has these two sons that she has adopted through her surrogate, Bilhah. And so she has Dan and Naphtali through her surrogate. But anything you can do, sister, I can also do, but I can also do it better. So now we got this whole tit for tat thing. And I get it because, my brother David, we competed a lot. We're 11 months difference in age, same mom, same dad, Irish twins, and we competed at everything. And I always tried to one-up my brother, and my brother always tried to one-up me. So everything he did, I tried to do it bigger and better. And here Leah sees that Rachel is building a family through her surrogate. And remember, Leah is all of a sudden, intermittently, she is now infertile. So she says, oh, well, my sister is using her surrogate to build a family. Well, I'll do the same. And so Jacob now has two sons with Zilpah, which is Leah's slave and maidservant. Verse 9, Leah saw. Remember, Rachel saw that she wasn't bearing any children. Now Leah sees what's happening in the family dynamic. So she saw that she had stopped having children. So she took her slave Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Now, Jacob is forced into marriage number 3 that he didn't ask for, didn't want, and didn't desire. Jacob got Leah, who he didn't want. He's got Bilhah, who he didn't want, didn't desire, didn't long for, didn't ask for, and now he's got Zilpah. So now he's got 4 wives, Only one of them he wants. The other three were forced on him. And the thing that jumped out at me is the train wreck, the dumpster fire, the crash and burn that is the TLC show, Sister Wives. And I don't know if anybody's watched this show. My wife was watching this train wreck when it first came on. And I hated this show because these were the most backwards, dysfunctional people on God's earth. And my wife ate this show up like it was candy. I'd come in the bedroom to just check on my wife and see what she's up to. I'd walk in the bedroom and I'd look at the TV and look at her on the bed soaking up this nonsense, and I walk right back out of the room. These people, this almost is unbelievable, the nonsense on this show. This guy, Cody, marries these four women individually. I think his first wife was Mary, the lady all the way on my left, so your right. And then I think Janelle was the second wife, and then Christine was the third wife, and then Robin, the brunette, she was the last wife. And Cody is married to these four women, and they all have families and a whole bunch of kids and grandkids, and they all live next door to each other. I mean, they bought 4 houses next door to each other. They lived in Utah, and then they moved to Vegas, and then I think they moved to Arizona. Why do I know all of this? Because I'm telling you, my wife was watching this nonsense. And then at some point, Stacy said, this is just too dysfunctional and too crazy for me. And so Stacy stopped watching. My wife loves a train wreck, like a lot of folks. She loves dumpster fire, but my wife has a threshold for how low she will go with nonsense. And once you get too stupid, she ends it, right? So she doesn't watch the show anymore. And I think that they got divorced, and some of the wives left Cody. And I felt bad for the brother because, look, he's got 4 wives, and every night he sleeps with a different one of the wives. And he's got all of these kids and grandkids and their birthday parties and all of the stuff. And he's strung out trying to please all 4 wives and give all 15 or 18 kids or however many they have, trying to sort through that. And some of them are old enough to have grandkids. And this guy has gone, and you can just go back and watch. If you'd like a train wreck, this will suit your case. But I felt sorry for Cody after a while, because no matter what he did, it was always wrong, and it was never enough. And everybody felt slighted, and you're not here enough, and we need you to do this, and you dropped the ball on that, and we didn't like the way you did that, and nobody's happy. And whenever they brought the families together to have family, all 4 wives and all of the kids in one room to talk through the issues, everybody was mad. And some people liked this and some people didn't like that. And then when he moved them from Utah to Vegas to Arizona, some people didn't want to go and some people wanted to stay. And all the time. That's Jacob. Jacob is Cody. Because he's got Rachel, and he's got Zilpah, and he's got Bilhah, and he's got Leah, and it's just all of this stuff, and Jacob's probably going crazy. And notice you don't hear him talking at all in the story, do you? It's the wives taking control of the situation and manipulating it to get it to where they want it. And Jacob is radio silent, except for his pushback against Rachel in verse 2. Oh, Jacob. Feel sorry for this brother. But Jacob now has these 4 wives, and he's going to bear these children with them at Leah's demand. So verse 10 and 11 say, Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a son, and Leah said, what good fortune, and she named him Gad. And so here in this text, this son Gad means good fortune, good luck, favorable outcomes, because she believes that, hey, my husband has married my maidservant, and here I've got a 5th son, and this is God's good fortune and good luck to me. Well, in verses 12 and 13, Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and Leah said, I am happy that the women call me happy. So she named him Asher. And Asher has two meanings. It means to go straight, to go forward, or to advance, but it can also mean to be blessed, happy, or fortunate. And I think that is what Leah means by the name Asher. Stacy's nephew is named Asher, and so I love that particular name. Now, moving on to this next section, there are now 8 sons born to Jacob. He has 4 with Leah, 2 with Bilhah, and 2 with Zilpah. So there are 8 total. But Leah becomes fertile again, and she has 2 more sons with Jacob, and let's throw in a daughter for good measure. We didn't talk about the girls in these biblical genealogies, but we're going to meet one here. How about that? Let's enjoy that. But here's a setup to Leah becoming fertile again. It says Reuben, Leah's firstborn son, went out during the wheat harvest and found some mandrakes in the field. And when he brought them to his mother Leah, his aunt asked him, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But Leah replied to her sister, isn't it enough that you've taken my husband? Now you also want to take my son's mandrakes? Well then, Rachel said, your husband, my husband, can sleep with you tonight in exchange for some of your son's mandrakes. So it's probably April, May, June. It's during the harvest time, and little Reuben has gone out wandering, playing in the vegetation, and he's come home with these mandrakes. There's a slide for you of these mandrake plants that are here. The mandrakes were a sought-after plant that produced violet flowers, an exotic scent, yellow tomato plum-sized fruit. This plant was of the tomato family. It grows out of the ground like potatoes do. And mandrakes were believed to be an aphrodisiac. It enhanced male and female sexual prowess and fertility. You can tell from the tomato or plum type fruit that you eat it kind of like a tomato, but they also look like male testicles, and so it was believed in the ancient world that when you ate the mandrakes that it boosted sexual prowess and fertility. And so Rachel is desperate. She is the only one of the 4 wives that's infertile. And so she sees that her nephew has brought some mandrakes home, and so she asks her sister, can I have some of your son's mandrakes? And the reality is that Leah invites her sister Rachel to come to the show, Let's Make a Deal. Because Jacob has been great at making deals, and so this whole family is great at bartering deals. And so here Rachel is forced to make a deal with her sister, and in exchange for the mandrakes, Rachel says, "Oh, you can have a conjugal visit with our husband tonight in exchange for these mandrakes. You give me the fruit, and you get all of the loving from our husband tonight." Jacob's nowhere to be seen. He has no idea about the conversation going on between his wives. Look at verse 16. This is interesting because it says, when Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him. She didn't wait for him to get home. She meets him in the field and says, "You must come with me, for I have hired you with my sons, your sons, mandrakes." So Jacob slept with her that night. Can you imagine Jacob coming in from a hard day's work and the wife you don't love and that you don't care for says, hey, I made a deal. I hired you tonight. And so she may have your heart, but your butt belongs to me. So you sleeping with me tonight. I wonder how Jacob felt. Verse 17 and 18 says, God listened to Leah. She conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving my slave to my husband. And she named him Issachar. And so here Leah has a fifth son, as God has now reversed her infertility, and she has given birth to this son. Issachar is the idea of being rewarded for wages and salary and that sort of thing. It's interesting is that Leah takes advantage of Rachel's desperation, just like Jacob took advantage of Esau's desperation when he was hungry and sold him his birthright for that bowl of lentil soup and that bread. Esau was desperate. Jacob took advantage. Here, Rachel is desperate for children, and Leah takes advantage of her sister as well. But this son, Issachar, he is the result of these wages of being hired, because Leah hired Jacob to be intimate with her, and Issachar is the reward and result of that. And so his name is a play on the fact that he is the reward of the fact that Leah believes giving Zilpah to Jacob to have more children was God's reward to her. Now, in verses 19 and 20, Leah has a sixth son, who she named Zebulun. Look at this. It says, then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah says, God has given me a good gift. This time my husband will honor me because I have borne six sons for him. And again, she names him Zebulun. Zebulun is the Hebrew word for gift or honor. And here Leah hopes that Jacob will finally honor and respect and dignify her after giving her these six sons. And again, she is sadly mistaken. Not only that, but verse 21 says, later Leah bore a daughter and named her Dinah. Dinah is built off of the same root that Dan is built off of, to mean judge or vindicate or defend, like Daniel or Dan. So it comes from the same root. There's no explanation for this named daughter. This namesake for Dinah. We will meet her again tragically in chapter 34. But Moses wants to introduce us to this one daughter in the midst of these 11 sons born to Jacob. Now, the last paragraph, Jacob's one son with Rachel, and then we'll get to our Coram Deos. Verse 22 says, then the Lord remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. God remembers Rachel. He listens to her. He opens her womb. Remember, we talked in Genesis that when God is the subject of this word zakar, when God remembers, Moses is not pointing to God's memory, but he's emphasizing God's mission. Not God's recollection points God to rescue. So when God thinks about or turns his attention to someone or something, like God remembers Noah in the ark and God delivers him from the ark. When God remembers Abraham in Genesis 19, God rescues Lot. So when God remembers, he rescues. His memory is connected to his mission. And here God sees that Leah has borne six sons, that Bilhah and Zilpah both have borne two sons apiece, and that Leah's given him a daughter. There's these 11 children born, and God says, I want to remember Rachel. And so God moves to rescue her from her infertility in verse 22. And look at what God does in verses 23 and 24. She finally, after 13 years or so, she conceives and bore a son. And she said, God has taken away my disgrace. And she named him Yosef, or Joseph, as we say it in the English. And she said, may Yahweh add another son to me. And so Yosef, or Joseph, means to add or to increase or to be plentiful. And so after 13 years of praying and envying and devaluing herself and competing with her sister and these wives, Rachel finally becomes pregnant as a result of God's amazing grace. Maybe Rachel just hadn't seen it. She just hadn't seen it yet. That's why we sung the song today, because I think Rachel would sing that song. Finally, she's looking forward to not just this son, Yosef, but she's looking forward to maybe God's going to give me another son, since my sister has 6 and the other 2 slaves have 2 and I only have 1. Maybe God's going to bless me with another son. And tragically, God does. In chapter 35, Jacob has 12 sons. In this saga, he only has 11. Because in chapter 35, Rachel is going to give birth to the 12th son, who will be a tribal leader. But Rachel will die giving birth to Benjamin. And so that's the tragedy. Remember, she said, give me a son or I will die. Well, she dies giving birth to Benjamin in chapter 35. And we'll mourn her loss when we get there. Let me say this as a brief excursus, and then we'll look at our Coram Deo. Leah and Rachel have indirectly taught their children to compete for Jacob's affection and attention. Their riveting rivalry will rip the patriarchal family apart and nearly derail their destiny. That's what these moms have taught their sons. That it's a competition for dad's attention and his affection. And so they're socialized, doing everything they can to beat their brothers out, to be the apple of their father's eye. And as we move on in Genesis, that sibling rivalry and that competition is going to put this family square behind the 8 ball. Why? Because that's what our moms taught us. The only thing that matters is dad's approval. Not God's approval, it's dad's. And that's not good. Way to go, Mom. So Laban sets up Leah for a lifetime of heartache, and these mothers take that same dysfunction and they transfer it to their sons, and they're almost going to kill each other as a result. Not a good look for God's chosen family, is it? Here are my 3 takeaways, and these just jumped off the page at me this week. And the first one is this: Jesus is for the unloved because Jesus comes from the unloved. Jesus is from which one of the 12 tribes? Yep, Jesus is from the tribe of Judah. Who's Judah's mother? Leah. And so Jesus is a descendant of the woman who was unloved, who was neglected, who was given the cold shoulder. And Jesus comes into this world for the unloved because he is from the unloved. Somebody ought to say amen about that, because that's some good truth. Number 2, God sovereignly and providentially works through the discord, dysfunction, superstition about mandrakes, and the depravity of this family to fulfill the Abrahamic promises. This family couldn't be more dysfunctional or malfunctional, and yet God is working through it to fulfill the promise he made to Abraham, which is what? That I'm going to make your descendants great. And God is doing that real time. Number 3, envy is an enemy to our souls. It robs us of our joy. It short circuits our perspective and oftentimes leads us to take matters into our own hands to our peril. And that's exactly what happens in this text. So God, thank you for these lessons that you have taught us in this grand story. Thank you that on the one hand you are allowing Jacob to reap the whirlwind, because that's what he sowed earlier through his deception and through his trickery and through his deceit and through his treachery against his father and his brother. But even in the midst of justice coming to Jacob, you're still blessing him because you've given him these amazing 11 sons and this beautiful daughter whom he loves. So God, these 12 children are a blessing. And so God, we thank you that you're a God who can even bless in the midst of allowing us to reap the consequences of our sinful behavior. Because you are a great and a just God. So God, would you help us to learn the lessons from these patriarchs and these matriarchs? Would their failures and their shortcomings be lessons for us about how to live a God-honoring life in a way that doesn't fulfill these patterns of brokenness and family dysfunction and a lack of faith and an overindulgence in human approval and a lack of commitment to get approval from the one who matters most, and that is you, Almighty God. So show us how to live this coram Deo as we live this in your presence and before your face. In Jesus' name, amen.